90 Miles to Havana. Written and read by Enrique Flores Galvez.
Big fish. We're fishing at the edge of the Gulf Stream 2 miles north of Havana. From this far out, the city looks like it's about to be swallowed by the waves. Havana is sinking, I say to Bebo. He's standing behind the wheel. I guess Columbus was right, he says. The earth is round. Bebo says without a hint of a smile on his face. He hands me a nautical chart of the north coast of Cuba. Check the compass and the chart. Tell me exactly where we are. I run my finger across the dark gray band marking the Gulf Stream, then up to the last link in the chain of islands hooking south from the tip of Florida. I check the big brass compass. Key West is 85 miles north-northeast of us, and Havana is 5 miles due south. You're getting the hang of it, Bebo says, and when my father yawns, Bebo nods towards the stern of the boat. I think he's had enough for the day. Papi's been sitting in the fighting chair almost the whole day waiting for a bite, but he hasn't gotten as much as a nibble. He's not too happy about the possibility that we might be going home empty-handed. My father thinks that if we catch a big fish on December 31st, we'll have good luck every day of the coming year. My two brothers and I always go fishing with him on that day. We usually have a few big ones to show my mother and the Garcias, our next-door neighbors, when they meet us at the dock. After the fish are cleaned and put away, we eat dinner and celebrate New Year's Eve on the boat, with the carnival music and revelers playing and dancing in the street above us. When Papi stretches and then yawns, again, Bebo whispers, "Hurry up, he's gonna get up." I'm standing next to Papi smiling when he starts to unclip the rod from the chair. The fighting chair is made out of steel and wood, swivels and tilts just like the ones in the barbershop, but it has no cushions. It does have straps and the hardware to clip the rod to the chair so you don't get pulled into the water when you're fighting a big fish. Of all the years to go home empty-handed, he says, looking over my head at the horizon. Papi, can I take a turn on the chair? I ask and look around for my brothers. I can hear Gordo and Aquilino, the oldest, buzzing around our next-door neighbor, Angelita. They're too busy to notice that Papi has gotten up. I'm a lot bigger than I was last year, I add, squaring my shoulders and standing up as straight as I can. I don't know, Julian. The fish out here are huge. A flick of their tail and they'll pull you right in. Yeah, but I'm stronger now. It's late, Julian. Maybe next time. But what if there's no next time? I heard you talking to Mr. Garcia on the phone this morning. You said everything is changing and this could be our last fishing trip. Papi is looking at me, sizing me up as if he's never seen me before. So do you think you can handle a big fish? I know exactly what to do, I say, with as much confidence as I can muster. Okay, Julian, he says, and squints at the setting sun. I guess we have time for one more pass. I jump into the chair as fast as I can, and before my brothers can claim it or Papi can change his mind. This is your big chance, my father says, and then helps me fit the end of the rod into the metal cup in between my knees. He clips the rod to the brass fitting on the arm of the chair. There. Now, if a big fish wants to pull you in, it'll have to take the chair too. I grip the rod tight and set my feet. I'm ready. My father smiles at me. Good. You know the rule, right? Yes. Yell even if it's just a nibble, I say, repeating what he tells everyone that climbs up on the chair. Papi is staring out at the horizon again, but now he's shaking his head. I know he's thinking that it's over for the day, for this year. But you never know. If I catch a big one, Papi will get a year's worth of luck, and they'll take a picture of me standing next to the big fish hanging upside down on the dock. Out of respect for the fish, I'll look real serious just to show that he put up a good fight. Don't worry, Papi. I'll catch one for us. That would be nice, he says, and then he pats the 2 cigars in his shirt pocket. He and Bebo always light up on the way home. Holding the rod firmly in my left hand, I pinch the line between my right thumb and forefinger, just like my father does. The fishing line is slicing into the waves, the green lure spinning beneath the wake, and I can almost see the big blue marlin lurking right behind it. Julian, Bebo calls. Don't look at the water. You'll get seasick. He must have read my mind. See, Bebo, I yell, and then look up. Not at the horizon, but just above it. Bebo taught me that trick and 1,000 others. He used to drive a truck for my father, but when Papi heard he was a great cook, he convinced him to give up the truck and take up the spoon for our house. Now he cooks, takes care of the boat, and teaches me things. Ever since my brother stopped letting me hang around with him, Bebo makes sure I have something to do. It doesn't matter what he's doing, he always lets me help. If he's cooking a paella, he'll show me how to cut the peppers and onions and then leave me alone. And unlike my parents or my brothers, he knows that I'm smart enough to figure out how to do the job without cutting all of my fingers off. My father and Bebo have lit up their cigars. The smoke is billowing around my head, mixing in with the thick exhaust fumes coming from the engine. I hope I get a bite soon. You feel anything yet? Bebo asks as he opens up the engine hatch just below my feet. No, the only thing I feel is seasick from your cigar, I answer. Bebo sits down next to the ticking engine. Gasoline fumes are wafting up out of the open hatch, and my head is starting to spin. I sit up, shake the rod, and set my feet, hoping that'll make me feel better. Bebo chuckles at me as he pulls a dime out of his pant pocket and then reaches around the carburetor. Let's see if I can make this engine run smoother. Bebo takes his trusty paper clip from his shirt pocket, wiggles it inside the carburetor as he turns a hard-to-reach screw with his dime. Adjusting the mixture of air to gas, the engine runs on. I've watched him take the carburetor apart 100 times. Now I can see through the greasy metal into the little chambers where the air and the gasoline mixture is turned into a vapor, then fed into the piston. When the piston pushes up, it compresses the vapor in the cylinder, the spark plug fires, and the vapor explodes. The explosion pushes the piston down and then it turns the crankshaft, which then spins the propeller. It's simple if you can see through metal. I like being around Bebo because he'll explain how to read a compass or how a complicated carburetor works, and never once say that I'm too young to understand. When Bebo climbs out of the hatch, the engine is humming smooth. He holds up the dime and his paper clip. This is all El Maestro needs, he says as he puffs on his cigar, then tilts his head to listen to the engine. It's idling too slow, he announces. Then he stomps back up to the wheel to adjust the throttle. We have a box full of tools, but he never touches them. Bebo likes to invent. I have all the tools I need up here, he says, pointing at his head. A cloud of cigar smoke has now settled around my head like a strange gray hat. My stomach is starting to re-scramble the eggs I ate for breakfast when I feel a delicate tug on the rod. I'm not sure if it's a nibble or just the rocking of the boat. I reel in some line and wait, hoping my head will stop spinning. Bebo told me that some fish will take the bait in their mouth, then spit it out if they don't like the taste. I'm about to call my father when there's another gentle tug on the rod. If the fish has the bait in its mouth, I don't set the hook, he might just spit it out. Maybe I should say something, but I don't. I know the second I open my mouth, my brothers or my father will take the rod away from me. Then I'll lose the fish for sure, miss my chance. Another tug. He's not just tasting anymore. He likes the bait. I jerk the rod back. It bends and strains against the clips. When I try to reel in some line, it feels like I'm caught on an old anchor or a truck. Then as the hooked fish tries to swim away, the line flies out and the reel winds. Gordo is the first to hear it. Julian hooked one, he yells. Gordo and Alcalino are already at my side. They're trying to grab the rod out of my hands. But I don't want to let go. There's something big and powerful at the other end of the line. I can feel its strength shooting right through me like electricity, like the time I stuck my finger in the outlet. I want to pull this fish in. I want to be the hero for once. Why should I give it up? Julian, it's too big for you, Alcalino yells as my father leans in to adjust the drag so that the line will go out easier. And suddenly the fish stops pulling, but the line is still going out. Give me the rod, Gordo yells and then tries to pull the rod out of my hands. Everybody's yelling at me, but then I hear Bebo's calm voice. He's going to run again, Julian. Take up the slack. I wind the crank as fast as I can, but before I've taken in all the loose line, the fish starts to run and the line starts going out again. The reel is spinning blurry fast and making strange crunching noises. I can hear the metal clips straining. If the rod hadn't been clipped to the chair, I would have been pulled into the water. The tip of the rod is dipping into the waves. Little droplets of water are dancing off the line. My arms hurt, but I'm pulling back. Suddenly, the fish explodes out of the water, not more than a boat length away. Its sword is slashing at the blue sky. The black and purple stripes on its back sparkle as it rides its tail across the indigo swells. He's longer than our station wagon, I gasp. When the fish slaps into the water, it sends up a huge splash. The line snaps, and I fly back into the chair. I knew you were going to lose him, Gordo yells as we watch the tangled fishing line disappear into the deep blue chop. Papi, you should have made him give me the rod. I could have caught that fish. It's gone, my father says. Nothing we can do. That was the last thing he said to me on the way home. He didn't even look at me when I crawled into the cabin and then latched the door. I'm keeping my eyes glued to the horizon, pressing my forehead up against the glass of the porthole. I can hear Gordo on deck laughing and repeating, "He lost the biggest fish we ever hooked," over and over again. I'm not the only one. He lost a big one last year, but I didn't laugh at him. Every time I rewind and then run the film in my head, from the first nibble to when the line snapped, I see it all a little clearer, and then I feel a little worse. If only I had said something sooner, let someone else take him. Maybe we would have caught him. But I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be the one in the photograph standing next to the big fish. Gordo is still laughing at me. He's up on deck, but then I hear Angelita say, "Give it a rest, Gordo. He feels bad enough as it is. You don't have to rub it in." He should feel bad. He lost the biggest fish That's enough, Gordo, my father snaps at him. Then I hear somebody pushing on the door. "Julian," Angelita calls softly through the slat of the door. "Let me in." I press my whole face into the glass. I don't want to see anybody. "It's not just anybody. It's Angelita, your friend," she says sweetly. Angelita is Gordo's age and a year younger than Alcalino. We've all been friends for as long as I can remember. But ever since Alcalino started growing little hairs on his chin that looked like curly brown wires, both he and Gordo have been acting differently around her. Angelita told me once that I'm her favorite now because I don't act weird. We can still talk like normal human beings. "Julian, open this door. Let me in," Angelita insists. I don't want her to be mad at me too, so I get up and open the door a crack. "All right, but just you," I say. Angelita steps down into the cabin, but before she can close the door, Alcalino stumbles in behind her. "Alcalino, what are you doing here?" He's standing behind her, ears burning bright red. I just have to, he starts and then stops. Poor Alcalino. He's never like this when she's not around. But when Angelita looks at him, or she gets too close, he stumbles over the smallest pebbles and the simplest words. "Julian, don't listen to Gordo. It could have happened to anybody," Alcalino says, and then pushes his glasses higher up on his nose. "There could have been a knot in the line, and that's how Gordo lost the fish last year, remember?" I know he's trying to make me feel better. "Thanks, Alcalino," I say, but I can't look at him, because I know exactly why I lost that fish. "Is that all?" Angelita sighs and then nods towards the door. I can feel Alcalino's ears throbbing as he stumbles up the stairs. "Alcalino's a good guy," she says, and then scratches the back of her arms. "But he acts so weird around me, it makes my skin itch." Then she sits down next to me. "Now tell me what happened." "I lost a fish. That's what happened," I blurt out. "It was my fault." "Didn't you hear what Alcalino said? It could have happened to anyone." "Papi told me to yell if I had a nibble, but I didn't," I confess. "I should have said something sooner." "So why didn't you?" I look down at my hands, picking at a scab on my knuckle. "I don't know. It happened so fast," I mumble. Suddenly, the bow smacks into a big wave and the boat jumps and then rolls. Angelita waves her hand in front of her face. I don't feel so good. Then she squints at me like she's trying to focus her eyes. "So why didn't you say something sooner?" "I didn't want to let go of the rod. I didn't want to give up my fish." "Go on," she says. "When I had that fish on the line, it was so strong. It made me feel important. I wanted to be the one that brought him in. I wanted to be the hero just once, but I lost him. Angelita gives a feeble laugh. Ay, chico. Are you laughing at me too, Angelita? No, I'm laughing because the cabin is starting to spin. Angelita takes a hold of my face with both hands. Don't you start moving too. Now, listen. People like your father go after the big fish because they're powerful, and it makes them feel powerful too. They don't do it to put food on the table. And the minute Angelita mentions food, her face turns a shade lighter. And do you really think your father believes all that big fish, big luck superstition stuff? If you ask him why his buildings get built, do you think he's going to say that it's because he caught a slimy fish that year, or because he's a great architect? She's right. I could never see him giving the credit for his success to a fish. But still, every time we catch one on the last day of the year, another one of his buildings sprouts up in Havana. I have no idea what fish have to do with buildings, but if he says they bring him luck, I have to believe him. Angelita puts her hand on my head, tweaks out a weak smile, and then pushes off. I gotta get out of here. I need some air, she says as she gropes her way out of the cabin. It took every anti-seasick trick that Bebo ever taught me to stay below until it got dark. My head is spinning when I open the door and peek out. Aquilino, Gordo, and my father are sitting on the bow talking. I climb out of the cabin and go stand next to Bebo at the wheel. Everybody makes mistakes, Julian. The trick is to learn how to put them away for later. Keep your eyes on the road. Pay attention to the next thing coming around the bend. Bebo never makes a big deal out of mistakes. When the time is right, we'll talk about it, figure out what went wrong. Bebo is carefully guiding the boat just under the light from El Morro, the old Spanish fort at the mouth of the harbor. Are we taking the shortcut, I ask? It's late, he says, as he nudges the boat into the shadow of the cliffs. The light from El Morro is sweeping the water behind us as Bebo threads the boat around the several large boulders, dangerously close to the dark cliffs. It's so dark in the shadows that I can't quite see the cliff walls, but they feel close enough to touch. My father told me that in the old days, pirates and rum runners used this channel to sneak in and out of Havana without getting caught in the beam of the light. Can you hear the sound of the engine bouncing off the walls? If you listen carefully, you can steer by that sound, Bebo says as he steers out of the shadows and then into the middle of the peaceful harbor. There are rusty freighters anchored all around us, but the only thing moving on the black water is a red and white ferry chugging across Havana Harbor. We watch the ferry bump into the dock and drop off 2 or 3 passengers. You'd think there would be more people coming into the city. It's New Year's Eve, Bebo says, and then looks around. It's quiet tonight. You want to take the wheel? I would usually jump at the offer, but now I'm not so sure. What if I crash the boat into a freighter? What if my father's right about his luck and the big fish? No thanks, Bebo. Maybe next time. Flying chairs. The buildings along the harbor, lit up by the street lamps below, look ghostly, like faces in the dark with a flashlight shining up on them. Havana's too quiet for a New Year's Eve. Except for the occasional sharp popping sounds echoing off the buildings, the music and the voices all seem to be coming from far away. I'm about to ask Bebo about the popping sounds when I hear Gordo say that they are gunshots. People are shooting at each other, he says, as if he's dead sure of it. But Gordo can't be right. How could people be shooting at each other on New Year's Eve? It's the best night of the year. My mother and Mrs. Garcia are all dressed up in their best dresses, and as usual, they've traded each other a piece of their favorite jewelry to wear for the night. Alida's silver bracelets are dangling on my brother's wrists, and my mother's golden swallow with the ruby wings is sparkling on a strap of Alida's dress. The streets should be full of people dressed up in their masks, feathers, and silk, dancing and laughing the night away. But tonight Havana is scary quiet. My mother is setting out the food. Mrs. Garcia is handing out the party hats with one hand and holding on to Pepe, Angelita's younger brother, with the other. She's got him all dressed up in white again. I feel sorry for Pepe, because Alida watches him like a hawk. She never lets him ride bikes or play baseball with us. She's afraid he'll hurt himself or get dirty, Sometimes her clinginess is contagious, and my mother tries to do the same thing to me. But I'm much faster than Pepe, and I've learned from my brothers how to stay one step ahead of her. After an unusually quiet dinner, my father breaks out the confetti and fireworks, and then we run up on the dock to wait for the big moment. At the stroke of midnight, we throw confetti at our parents and then jump into the boat yelling, "Feliz Año Nuevo!" My father and Mr. Garcia look annoyed. "You're making too much noise," my father growls. My mother and Alida look down at the pink rolls of confetti still in her hands and smile politely. "It's New Year's Eve," Angelita mumbles. "We're supposed to make noise." Just then, 3 sharp, loud metallic pops slash through the wood and cement above us on the dock. "Everybody down," my father yells. We're huddled under the table, and the only thing I can think of is that real gunshots are nothing like the ones in the movies. Real gunshots are like the roar of a lion compared to the meow of a cat. I peek out at the men in jackets and ties shouting and waving pistols over their heads on the dock above us. "We're free! The dictator has flown away," they yell. Then one of the men aims his pistol in our direction. "He's gonna shoot at us," I scream, and duck back under the table. The windscreen in front of the wheel shatters and diamond nuggets of glass rain down all around us. "Viva la revolución!" he shouts. Then he gathers his group and they dance away. My father is the first one standing. I hear him crunching around on the broken glass. "This party's over. Everybody in the cars," he says, trying to sound calm. But there's something different about his voice. I think it's fear. We throw the dinner plates and the food into a basket as Bebo and Mr. Garcia sweep up the glass. My father locks up the boat and then we jump into our cars. I'm waving goodbye and wondering if Pepe or Angelita noticed that my hand is trembling. Bebo's driving slowly down the Malecón, a broad avenue that runs between the shore and the city. My father's looking out the passenger side window at the angry, churning sea. "I guess we didn't see this one coming," he says, and then points at the dark gray clouds rolling over us. Just ahead, a big wave crashes against the seawall and rises like a white foam hand reaching for the delicate old houses across the boulevard. A noisy crowd has gathered in front of the corner house. Bebo slows the car down to a crawl. People are chanting and dancing on a carpet of paintings, curtains, and clothing. They cheer when a man walks out into the balcony, waves, and then says something to the crowd. As soon as he walks back inside, it starts raining chairs. They come spinning through the windows, flying over the railing, and crashing dangerously close to the wild mob. But no one seems to mind. My father signals Bebo to keep moving. As we drive away, 4 men are lifting a black piano up into the railing of the balcony. "Papi, why are they throwing all the furniture into the street?" I ask. "That house belonged to the president," my father says. "I have a very bad feeling about this revolution," my mother grumbles. "They're taking back what he took from them, but they'll settle down when they even the score," my father says as the car creeps forward. "I don't see anyone keeping score, do you?" my mother asks. On the next street, a group of men are pulling the parking meters right out of the cement with their bare hands. "Don't look away, boys. I don't want you to ever forget what a revolution looks like." When Bebo turns into Quinta Avenida, he accelerates. As we fly down the long, straight avenue toward home, my father and my mother are listening to the radio. A man with an unusually high, nasal voice is announcing that our dictator president has left Cuba. He loaded up 3 airplanes with his family and all the money they could carry, and then they flew away. Airplanes stuffed with bags of money, chairs flying out the windows, people pulling out parking meters. I'm starting to get this scary feeling that anything could happen, anytime, anywhere. It's like the glue that kept everything and everyone together started to dissolve right after I lost the big fish. The omelet. The next morning I get up early and go down to the kitchen. Before I push the door open, I stop and listen to make sure it's safe. I hear Bebo humming a familiar tune to the chop, chop, chop beat of his knife on the cutting board. Everything's normal so far, I say to myself, and then swing the door open. Bebo greets me without looking up from the green peppers he's cutting. Hola, Bebo, I say as I lay out a fresh sheet of paper and open up my box of pencils. Are you gonna make me a drawing of our wild New Year's Eve, Julian? Sure, Bebo. Bebo doesn't think I'm too old to draw, but my brothers do. They're always telling me that drawing is for little kids. That it's one of those things that you leave behind when you grow up. But what do they know? My father draws all the time, too. Once I saw him draw a building on a napkin, and then after he had his coffee, he folded it up and stuck it in his pocket. A few months later, he drove us to a construction site, and there was the building he had drawn, rising right out of the mud. I don't know how he did it, but he turned a few lines on a napkin into 10 stories of real bricks and cement. That's when I started thinking that drawing is like magic. When I draw, I have X-ray vision. I can see how all the parts fit together, and then I understand how things work, and sometimes how I feel. When I finish, I put the drawing next to Bebo on the counter. Look at that, he says. You got everything moving around. The chairs flying out the window, people dancing. I can almost hear them yelling. Bebo, can I ask you a question? Claro, chico. What is a revolution? I mean, I know that people want things to change. I heard it on the radio. But why? Why are they acting so crazy? Why are they so mad? What do they want? Bebo wipes the knife on his apron. Maybe you should ask your father or your mother. They went to college. They should know. You know how they are, Bebo. Even if they try to explain it, they'll make something up because they think I can't understand. They won't explain it like you do, like it is. Bebo smiles and looks up at the clock. Muy bien, Julian. I'll give it a try. He pauses to gather his thoughts, and then picks up my drawing. This is a good picture of a revolution, but it's only one part of it. To really show what a revolution is, you'd have to draw at least 3 pictures. A before, a during, and then an after. Bebo stops to look at the clock again. I have to get breakfast ready. The Garcias are coming over, he complains, and then starts cutting the onions into thin slices. You can't just leave it at that. Before, during, and after, what does that mean? That's how my parents would explain it. Bebo looks at me like I just insulted him. Then he shakes his head. But Niño, you're persistent, he says, and then chuckles. Muy bien, but a revolution is harder to explain than an internal combustion engine, so you better pay attention. Bebo picks up 5 brown eggs in his hand. This is before, he says, holding up the eggs like a magician about to make them disappear. Inside these eggs are all the important things that everybody needs. Schools, houses, food, and money. For one thing or another, a few people have gotten hold of all the eggs, and they don't want to share them. Then he starts cracking one egg after the other. The slippery yolks slide out and then chase each other around the white bowl. This is during. Things get smashed and cracked. Everything gets cut loose, and everybody starts to grab. That's what we saw last night. That's what's happening now, he says as he pokes the 5 yolks with a fork and then scrambles them into one big yellow lake. The after is the important part, he announces, and then tips the bowl so I can see the bubbling yellow stuff inside. You can make a lot of different omelets out of this stuff, depending on what you add to it and how you cook it. Bebo looks over his shoulder at the kitchen door. Some people are gonna love this new omelet, and some are gonna hate it. But there's one thing I can say for sure, Julian. Once you crack those eggs, nothing stays the same. Bebo smiles at me, and there's your revolution. Bebo, are you worried that you won't like the new omelet? I ask as he wipes his forearm across his eyes. No, I think I'm gonna like it, he says. Bebo is pushing the onions around the chopping board. I've got to concentrate on this omelet. The Garcias will be here in a few minutes. This lesson's over. Go play somewhere else. As I push the door open, the chop-chop starts up again. The Garcias are unusually quiet at breakfast. Every time I look at Angelita, she looks away. My mother fiddles with her water glass. My father is pushing his omelet around the plate. This is going to be our last breakfast together, Alida announces. We're leaving the country. Angelita is still looking down, her hair like a black curtain hanging over her plate. I can tell she's crying. Where are you going? I ask. Miami, Mrs. Garcia answers. We're leaving tomorrow. My father puts down his fork. Jose, I think you should wait. This will all get back to normal soon. I don't think so, he says. We've had a lot of revolutions here, but this one is different. Mark my words. We fall into a strange, uncomfortable silence, eating without looking at each other, thinking thoughts that are too sad to put into words. Alida's the first to start crying, then my mother. We say goodbye to Angelita and Pepe as if they were just going away on a short trip. We're all trying to act as if we've never had that sad thought, that thought that none of us could talk about, that this could be our last goodbye. This morning, a black car and an army truck drive up in front of the Garcia's house, but Mommy won't let us go over. When she walks away, we sneak up to her bedroom and climb out the window to the roof that overlooks Angelita's side patio. Below us, there are 3 men in green uniforms lounging in the shade of a mango tree. It's strange to see Alida's red kitchen table on the patio with 3 rifles leaning against it. When a small, dark-haired woman marches through the kitchen door, the 3 men grudgingly stand up. She's wearing Angelita's shiny black church shoes. They make her old dress look even shabbier. That's the lady that moved into Kiko's house right after he moved out, Aquilino whispers. Kiko lived across the street. His family was one of the first to leave. The very next day, the dark-haired woman's husband was walking around the neighborhood in Kiko's father's guayaberas. His son followed him around dressed up in a white shirt and red bandana, the uniform of the new government's youth brigade. Gordo is sure that they sent them here to spy on us. He says there's one just like her in every neighborhood in Havana. The Garcias walk out into their patio carrying their suitcases and then, one at a time, put them up on the table for the woman to search. She tumbles through their neatly folded clothes and then she slides her hand along the sides and bottom of the suitcases. She's looking for secret hiding places, Aquilino whispers. Before I can ask, he adds, Alida said they couldn't take anything with them, just a little money and the clothes that fit into 1 suitcase each. When the woman is satisfied that they're not trying to sneak their own jewels and money out of the country, she gestures for them to close the suitcases. But Angelita is not listening. She's slowly folding her clothes and carefully putting them back. The woman puts her hand on the lid, threatening to slam it closed, but Angelita continues folding her clothes. The woman steps in front of her, closes the suitcase, and then wags her finger under Angelita's nose. She's lecturing her about something, but Angelita is looking up at the clouds, pretending not to listen. Then the woman points at Angelita's necklace. Aquilino is leaning out dangerously close to the edge. That's the necklace I gave her for her 15th birthday, he says just a little too loud. You're going to fall, Gordo says, grabbing the collar of his shirt, then gently pulling him back from the edge. The woman looks up. I think she saw us, I say. We're not afraid of her, right, Aquilino, Gordo says. The woman is now holding her hand out, waiting for Angelita to give her the necklace, but Angelita turns away. Her father gently places his hands on her shoulders and whispers something. Suddenly, Angelita turns around, rips the thin gold chain from her neck, then flings the necklace against the wall. The woman in the white dress clenches her fists, but then she laughs and says something to the soldiers. She takes out a notebook, writes something down, and then waves them away. She's done with them. As they walk to the car, Angelita looks up, shading her eyes against the morning sun. I can see her mouth moving, but I can't hear what she's saying. Gordo and I wave as they get into their car. Aquilino is just standing there, his arms hanging limp at his sides. I'm going to miss Angelita. Gordo corrects him. We're all going to miss her. As they drive away, the little woman picks up the necklace and then shouts loud enough for us to hear. Gusanos! Why gusanos, I ask. Anyone who leaves is a gusano, a worm, Gordo answers. The soldiers close the green shutters and then seal them with a red paper stamp. The stamp, I said. Bebo told me that they put those on so that they'll know if anyone goes in after they've closed it up. We're watching the soldiers paste a big sign right on the front door when my mother yells from the bedroom, "The golden swallow! Alida wore it New Year's Eve. She forgot to return it." "Don't worry, I'll go talk to the woman," I hear my father say, and then he rushes down the stairs. By the time we get out to the sidewalk, my father is pleading his case. "Senora, please," he says politely. "It means a great deal to her." It's scary to hear my father pleading, almost begging. I've never heard him speak to anyone that way. It was a gift from her grandmother, and with so much going on, Mrs. Garcia forgot to return it. The woman raises her hand to silence him. "That would be against the regulations. I told you already, once the house is sealed, no one is allowed inside." Then she points at the sign on the door. "Read the sign carefully. If you're caught, you can be shot or thrown in jail." "Senora, please, try to understand. If you could make an exception this time." "Senor, it is you who has to understand. There will be no more exceptions. Things are different now," she says, and then walks away. She is right about things being different. In the last few days, the streets have filled with soldiers, most of them no older than Alquilino. They strut around, carrying their rifles on their shoulders like baseball bats. I think they're trying to impress the girls. Yesterday, I went with Bebo to fill the gas tank in my father's car. We had to wait for almost an hour to cross Quinta Avenida because there was a huge line of tanks and army trucks going by. On the way to the gas station, we saw lines of people waiting for the bus, lines for bread, milk, and meat. When I asked Bebo why the people in the food lines looked so grumpy, he said it was because they know that the shelves are probably going to be empty by the time they finally get inside. Of course, there was a long line at the gas station, but the biggest line of all was at the U.S. Embassy. Bebo said that the people in that line were waiting to get their passports so they can leave. The saddest line was the one that snaked around the back of the embassy. That line was for the parents who could not get passports but were trying to send their children out alone. Maybe that explained the steely expressions they all wore like masks. They looked sad and determined, as if they had made up their minds to take the medicine, no matter how bad it tasted. "How could parents send their children to a strange country all alone?" I asked, and Bebo shrugged. He didn't even try to answer. On the way back home, we had to wait to cross Quinta Avenida again. The same trucks, tanks, and soldiers we saw in the morning were now driving in the opposite direction. Wagging finger. Our new leader has just launched into his third talk of the week. And my mother is angry because she can't watch her favorite TV show. No wonder everybody's leaving. Who wants to listen to that man for 4 hours every night, lecturing, dictating, wagging his finger at everybody? She wags her finger at me. "Julian, make him disappear." With every click of the knob, the screen blinks, the dictator disappears, but then he appears again. "It's like a bad dream," my mother groans. "Everywhere you turn, everywhere you look, that face, the beard, pasted on every telephone pole and wall. We have the wagging finger, but no soap opera, and no Armando." She used to listen to her favorite radio announcer, Armando, read the novellas every night in his deep, dramatic voice. It was her favorite show. "Querida, you should keep your voice down. Our nosy neighbor across the street can hear everything you're saying, and you don't want to get on her bad side," my father says, almost whispering. "Did you try to talk to her again about getting my pin back?" my mother asks. My father shakes his head. It's like talking to a robot. No exceptions. "My grandmother gave me that pin," my mother cries, and then she storms out of the room. Alquilino has been staring into space, fiddling with his glasses. He's thinking. He's trying to figure something out. He and Gordo are so close, but they're so different. Gordo acts and then sometimes thinks about the consequences. Alquilino thinks forever about the consequences and then sometimes acts. He turns things around and around so much that sometimes he can't make up his mind. But I can tell by the way Alquilino pushes his glasses up on his nose that today he's going to act. "Come on, Gordo, I have a plan," he says, and then he and Gordo walk into my mother's bedroom. I follow a few steps behind, stopping at the door as they climb out the window to the flat roof. Locked up tight. Our neighborhood is turning into a ghost town. Almost every day the soldiers come with their guns and another family leaves. The soldiers seal the windows with their red tape, trapping the spirit of the families inside with their laughter, dishes, and photographs. Those empty houses, like the tombs of the Egyptian kings we read about in school, are dark and mysterious and begging to be explored. Alcalino and Gordo have been sneaking out late at night to explore, but they'd never let me go with them. We should do it tonight, before the new people move in, I hear Gordo say as they look down into Angelita's patio. We can go in through the pantry window. It doesn't have a latch. That's the way Angelita gets in when she gets locked out. But the shutters are locked up tight, Alcalino answers. We'll just have to pry them open with a screwdriver, Gordo says. I stick my head out the window. You don't need a screwdriver, I whisper, and then climb out to the roof. Pepe showed me where the extra key is. Where is it? Gordo demands. I'll tell you, if you let me go with you. Gordo reaches for me. Where is it, Julian? He says menacingly as I slip behind Alcalino. Julian, this could be dangerous. I know, Alcalino, but this is for Mommy, and I can help. Gordo shakes his head. I don't think he should go. What if he does something stupid? What if you do something stupid, Gordo? You're not perfect, and besides, I know all their hiding places. Pepe showed them to me, I say, and then duck just in case. Alcalino is scratching his chin again. If she didn't leave it in her jewelry box, then we'll have to search the whole house. And that's a big house, I add. The more of us searching, the better, right, Alcalino? Alcalino nods at Gordo. That makes sense to me. I say he can go. Fine, but if he messes it up, it'll be your fault. That night I'm waiting under the covers, fully dressed, my flashlight checked and ready. When Alcalino gives the signal, we sneak out of the house and then climb the tall fence into Angelita's patio. Alcalino and Gordo link their hands for me to step on, and I shimmy up the column to the balcony. Then I crawl across the narrow ledge to Pepe's window. Standing on my tiptoes, I feel along the top of the sill and find the key. The key slips into the lock, the door creaks open, and Gordo breezes by me. Pepe's wind chime clinks and clangs. Why didn't you tell me? Gordo says. You didn't give me a chance, I answer. Shh, Julian, close that door. Alcalino whispers as he walks into Pepe's bedroom. We step gingerly around the plastic horses, dump trucks, and army men scattered on the floor. The sad, abandoned toys look like they're waiting for Pepe to come home. The crumpled sheets on the unmade bed still hold Pepe's sleeping outline. It feels like he's about to walk into the room. We look in Mrs. Garcia's jewelry box, the dressers, and then in between the mattresses. And as we rifle through Mrs. Garcia's pocketbooks in the closet, the wind chime in Pepe's room clangs again. You closed the door, right? Alcalino asks. Yes, I answer. Someone's in Pepe's bedroom. Let's get out of here, Gordo says. Keeping our eyes on the landing above us, we fly down the stairs to the dark foyer. Then we creep along the wall to the door. Suddenly, a stoop-shouldered silhouette floats behind the railing in front of Pepe's doorway. The sun, Gordo hisses. Never mind who it is, Alcalino says, and pulls him back against the wall. Vamos. As we dash across the foyer, I remember the little hiding place in the pantry behind the tile. Pepe told me that his mother had it made to hide important things. As Alcalino slowly works the knob, I'm thinking that I could just run back in, get it, and run out. My mother would be so happy to see it. I would be the hero. But then I remember the nibble, the tug on the line, the lost fish, and I hesitate. What if I mess it up? We could all go to jail, or get shot. Wait, there's one more place we didn't look, I whispered to Alcalino. Where? Alcalino asks. There's a hiding place in the corner of the pantry. It's behind a loose tile. I'll show you. I grab his arm to pull him back in, but Gordo steps in between us. He's in Alida's bedroom now, he says. We can hear him upstairs opening and closing drawers, jangling metal hangers in the closet. He'll come down here next. You guys meet me at home. And before we can say anything, Gordo grabs my flashlight and then disappears into the shadows. Let's go, Alcalino says as he pulls me out of the house. We run between the bushes and the house to the back fence and wait there for Gordo. After a while, we hear voices. The front of the house is all lit up. Something's wrong, I say. I follow Alcalino to the bushes in front of the house. Trouble, he says. The little woman and her son are at our front door. She's waving her arms, pointing at her son, and then upstairs. Then she tries to wedge past my mother and father. She's saying something about us, I whisper to Alcalino. You have no right to come into my house in the middle of the night. I have no trouble hearing my mother when she's mad. Let's go. She wants to check our room, Alcalino whispers. We climb the thin trunk of a papaya tree that grows by our window, jump into the room, and as I'm about to pull the covers over my head, I see Gordo's empty bed. What if they come up? Alcalino's already under the covers, so I grab my pillow, jump out of bed, and then pull Gordo's covers back. Throw me your pillow, quick. I line up all 3 pillows, throw the covers over them. It doesn't look like him, I say, but no matter how I arrange them, it still looks like 3 pillows under a blanket. My mother is at the bottom of the stairs. I don't know what your son is talking about. I watch my boys go to bed. I grab Gordo's baseball glove from the night table, then lay it right next to where his hand would be, as if he had just put it down. As I get into bed, I hear the little woman at the top of the stairs. If they're in bed, then you have nothing to worry about. But if you don't let me in, I'll just have to assume that my son was right. It's all right, querida, I hear my father say. She'll look and then she'll go. Isn't that right, senora? It's not all right, my mother warns. If you let her in once... Our door opens, and a yellow shaft of light slices over Gordo's bed, then Alcalino's, stops on top of me. You see, my father says, they're all asleep. Please, I don't want to wake them up. Are you satisfied? My mother taunts the woman. My sons are sleeping and the real crooks are running away. I can almost hear them laughing. We'll see who gets the last laugh, the woman threatens, as the slice of light rakes back over us and then it's dark again. Gordo grunts as he pulls himself in through the window. He tumbles into the room, waving the little bird in the air as if it were flying. Look what I found behind the bag of rice. Then he digs into his pocket and pulls out Angelita's necklace. You got both, I whisper. The necklace was on the kitchen table, and the bird was right where you said it would be. That flashlight saved the day, too. I was coming out of the pantry and the kid was standing in the middle of the kitchen. I flashed the beam right into his eyes and then bolted out the door. I don't think he saw me. Gordo looks at his bed. Is that supposed to be me? Yeah, I say proudly. The glove. That's a nice touch. But it still doesn't look like me. That's the closest I've ever come to getting a compliment from Gordo. The next morning, I volunteer to sneak the bird into the kitchen where Mommy can find it. If she knew we broke into the Garcia's house, she would probably ground us forever. When I swing into the kitchen with the bird in my pocket, Bebo is standing by the stove, lost in thought, and waiting for a pot of water to boil. I place the bird in a pudding dish in the cabinet where my mother always puts her rings. She'll think that Alida returned it when she came for breakfast that last time. When I turn around, Bebo is still lost in the now gently bubbling water. His wooden spoon is hovering over the pot and ready to stir. I lean over the stove to look into his face. What's the matter, Bebo? I'm leaving tomorrow, he says without looking up. Leaving? Why? Because they're going to send me to school, that's why. They say I have what it takes to be a good engineer. Who's sending you to school? The government. The woman across the street told me where to go so I could take the test. I did really well, he says proudly. It's a great thing. The school is free and I'll get a place to live. I guess you like the omelet that they're cooking, huh, Bebo? Bebo looks at me for a second as if he doesn't know what I'm talking about. But then he bursts out laughing. Caramba, how could I forget? The eggs and the revolution. He laughs. You're right. I do like what they're cooking. I'm glad Bebo is going to school, but still I'm going to miss him. I wish you weren't going. Who else is going to teach me about carburetors and revolutionary omelets? And you said there was a lot more stuff that you wanted to teach me. Bebo shakes his head at me. You're right, Julian. There is a lot more for you to learn. But I taught you how to use this, he says, and then points at his temple. So the rest should come easy. I tried to teach you how to think, solve problems. Bebo smiles and his gold tooth twinkles. When I get older, I'm going to get a gold tooth just like yours, I say. Bebo laughs. sticks his big hand out and grips mine tight. I've been watching you and your brothers grow up. Alcalino and Gordo playing ball, arguing and fighting, always competing, and you off to the side watching. I had older brothers too. I was always trying to catch up, always trying to be just like them. What's wrong with trying to be like them? I ask. It's not always wrong. Sometimes it's good because it makes you try harder. But sometimes it's not good to play someone else's game. It can make you feel like you're not as good as them. I know how that feels, I say. Now let me give you a piece of advice. You'll never really grow up until you get out of your brother's shadows. Find your own game. What's my game, Bebo? I ask him. Bebo laughs at me. I can't tell you that, Julian, but you'll know it when you find it. You'll feel it right here, he says, putting his big hand on his chest. If you say so, Bebo. Claro, chico. Bebo knows about these things. You'll do fine, he says, just as the lid on the pot starts to rattle. Caramba, I overcooked the rice. Bebo's busy scraping the burned rice from the bottom of the pot as I say goodbye and walk out of the kitchen. His words are still spinning around in my head as I climb up the almond tree in front of our house. Sitting high up on my favorite branch, I can see the beach and the sea, and I can think. It's almost as good as drawing. Almond Revenge. I'm gnawing at what Bebo said when I spot Gordo walking out of the house. He stops under the tree and looks up at me. What are you doing up there? He asks, sounding annoyed. I'm about to tell him what I'm thinking about, but then I change my mind. Just checking out the almonds, I answer as he swings up into the tree. I pick one out, check the color, and then bounce it in my hand. They're perfect, I call down to him. At this time of the year, the green almonds are just the right weight and shape for throwing. They'll fly straight as an arrow, and if you're the unlucky target, you'll feel the sting well into the next day. Gordo climbs up to my branch and then walks out heel to toe without holding on to anything, just to show off. The branch bends as he stands over me. He pulls down a handful of almonds and then points at a street sign across the street. I bet you I can hit that sign. I bet I can too, I say. But before I can get up, his first shot clangs against the small rectangular sign. Bullseye. I'm getting ready to throw when Gordo steps right in front of me. Gordo, you're in my way, I complain, but he's not listening. He's watching the kid with the stooped shoulders walking around the corner towards his house across the street. Look who's coming, Gordo says. It's the snitch. He's right on time. Gordo carefully sorts through the almonds in his hands as the unsuspecting boy ambles within range. Gordo, what are you doing? I ask as he nestles a perfect almond into his left hand. You can't do that. Remember what Papi said about his mother. Quiet, he won't know what hit him. When the kid is perfectly framed in a big opening in the canopy, Gordo cocks his arm back. Oh, please, miss. Gordo bites down on his tongue like he does when he's about to throw a fastball. He winds up and then lets go. The almond draws a straight green line out of the tree and then smacks into the middle of the kid's forehead. His head snaps back, his mouth stretches open, but no sound comes out. Then his eyes roll like two black olives in bread pudding, searching in the trees, asking, who, why me? Gordo, why'd you have to hit him in the head like that? Gordo pulls me down. Quiet, don't move. We peer through the leaves as the boy runs into his house crying. That's what he gets for being a spy. You could have poked his eye out. When are you going to grow up? You can't let people get away with things. That's the way it is in the real world. Gordo jumps to the ground. You're hopeless, he says, and then walks away. Maybe I just don't want to be like you, I say, knowing he won't hear me. Then I yell as loud as I can, and I'm not hopeless. Pork chops. Tonight, my brothers and I set the table. This is the first time that my mother has cooked dinner since Bebo left 3 days ago. When she finally comes out of the kitchen, she's carrying a plate stacked with something that smells like burning meat. She swings the plate over my head and then sets it down in the middle of the table with a flourish of her hands. We all nod admiringly at the dark, smoldering shapes. My father is the first to guess. Pork chops? I traded my alligator shoes for them, she says proudly, and then launches into the story of the pork chops. Just as she's getting to the end of her complicated story, the little woman and her son slam through the kitchen door into the dining room. My mother bangs her glass down. Who let you into my house? My father pushes his chair back slowly and then gets up. How may we help our neighbor? The little woman points at her son, leaning into the wall behind her. Today, someone hit my boy with a rock, almost blinded him. We all stare up at the angry red egg growing out of his forehead. Gordo looks down, trying to hide a smile. She glares at us, searching our faces for a sign of guilt. He couldn't see who it was, but he's sure that the rock came from the almond tree in front of your house, she says. But we do know who broke into the empty house. My son is sure now that he saw your oldest son in the kitchen. Gordo looks across the table at Alcalino. That's impossible. They were in bed. You saw them, my father says. Save it for the judge. I've filed the papers. I have my witness. Your son will be charged with trespassing on government property. As she speaks, her dull eyes range over every item on the table. It will take a little time, but... Then her eyes land on the now cold, rigid pork chops. There were no pork chops in the stores this week, or in the ration book. She picks up the burned meat, pointing it at us like an accusing finger. How did you get this? Suddenly, my mother grabs the plate, pushes her hip into the door, and then disappears into the kitchen. The door closes, plates crash into the sink. When it swings open again, she steps out empty-handed, looking like she's about to explode. Magic, she says calmly. I clicked my heels and my alligator shoes turned into pork chops. Now, if there's nothing else we can do for our dutiful neighbor... She pauses for a breath and then screams, Get out of my house! Senora, it is against the law to buy food on the black market. You're setting a bad example for your children. She throws the pork chop down and wipes her hand on my mother's good tablecloth. You leave me no choice. They will be sent to one of our new schools where they can live in the proper environment, do healthy work, and start their re-education. No one is going to take my children away from me, my mother hisses. Papi wraps his arms around her. I think you better leave now, he says to the little woman, and then he escorts her out. Can she really send us away, Alcalino asks. No, she's just a busybody, Papi says. She's trying to reassure us. My mother waits for the kitchen door to slam shut and then sits down. She hides her face in her hands. She's not just a nosy neighbor. She can have you sent away. I'm sure she can't, my father starts, but my mother interrupts him. Yes, she can, and they're doing it already. First, they send them out to cut sugarcane, and then to a school in Russia, where they can put whatever they want into their heads. And when they come back, they're different. They won't even know us. Where did you hear that, Papi asks. The new radio station from Miami, my mother answers, and then crosses her arms. That's the signal that she's made up her mind. There's no need to argue the point. Gordo pokes his older brother. We'll cut cane, right, Alcalino? We're not scared. Making sure we're looking into her eyes, she says slowly, I'll send you away before I let them get their hands on you. Send us away, I ask? Yes, there's a man that helps parents get their kids out of the country. I've already called and started the whole process. He said there are camps in the United States where the Cuban kids can go to wait for their parents to get out. You did this without telling me, my father asks. My mother's face has turned into a steely mask. No one's going to take my children away. I recognize that look. I saw it on the faces of the parents waiting in the saddest line of all. I look away from my mother's eyes and start shoving the burned black beans around my plate. I never thought my mother could be like the parents waiting in that line, so determined to send their children to a strange country, all alone. There's a suitcase open on each one of our beds. My brothers are flipping through comic books they outgrew years ago. They glance at a page or two and then toss them under the bed. I'm drawing the angry little woman on the wall next to my bed. She's waving a black pork chop and leading a parade of tanks and soldiers marching the length of my bed. She's the first in line, but the last one I'm going to draw on this wall. We're leaving today. Hey, Julian, don't you think you're too old to still be drawing on the wall? Gordo yells from across the room. I don't answer. My mother used to get really angry when I drew on the wall. But lately, she hasn't had the time to notice what I draw, where I go, or even to talk to me. At night, all she ever talks about are the lines. The lines she has to stand in all day to get one signature for our visas, just so she can go to the end of the next line to get them stamped. Every time I ask her about the camps where we're going, she always says the same thing. The camps are beautiful. There are horses, lakes, and pine trees. Then, knowing what my next question is going to be, she adds, and don't you worry, we'll be there before you know it. I don't know why, but I get the feeling she's not telling me something. When I asked my brothers about where we're going, Alcalino looked away and said, Don't worry, it's going to be just like she says it is. Gordo just stood there with a big smirk on his face, like he and Alcalino were in on the joke and I was the one who didn't know the punchline. When my mother marches into our room, I don't even try to hide my drawing. She stops at my suitcase first. Her fingers run along the side walls, slowing down to a walk at the corners. I know she's feeling for the secret compartment she had put in behind the blue lining. Her golden swallow with the ruby wings, the one we rescued from Alida's house, is sleeping in its own secret blue pocket. If I wasn't looking for it, I'd never find it, she says, sounding satisfied. It's going to break my heart to sell it, but we're going to need the money when we get out, she says and checks the sides again. $50 and one change of clothes is all that they'll let us take out, and the government keeps everything else, she huffs. Does that sound fair to you? How can you start a new life on $50? I know it's not a good time to ask, but I ask anyway. What if they search me and they find it? Don't worry, Julian. They won't look in your suitcase. They search the older kids like your brothers. If they catch them trying to sneak jewelry out of the country, they'll keep them here, make them join the army, and then we'll never get them back. But what if? I start, but she cuts me off. Julian, she says, her voice rising, sugary sweet. That's the fake sweet voice she uses when she wants me to do something that I don't want to, or forget why I'm mad. At first, I wasn't going to tell you about the swallow. Even your brothers thought I shouldn't tell you. We were afraid you might give it away. But I think you can keep a secret. You told them and you weren't going to tell me, I say, pointing at my brothers as Gordo glares over his comic book at me. I can keep a secret as well as they can. I'm sure you can, querido, she says, and then draws an imaginary veil across her forehead. All you have to do is forget it's there. Wipe it right out of your mind. Then Gordo says, the real reason she told you was because we might get separated. Gordo, mind your own business, my mother snaps. We might get separated, I ask. You never said that before. My mother looks at her watch. Not another word. We don't have time for this, she says, her voice dropping back to the hard, commanding tone of the last few weeks. Then she starts checking the new clothes that I packed. 2 pairs of pants, 3 shirts, and socks. Very good. You have to take good care of these. We don't know how long they'll have to last, she warns. Before, you said it would be a few weeks, maybe a month. Now you don't know? I'm doing the best I can, Julian. I turn away and press my face into the wall. The plaster feels cool against my burning cheeks. Turn around. I have something for you, she says, her voice higher and syrupy sweet. When I turn around, she's holding out a small plate with one name tag on it. She couldn't just hand me the paper. She has to serve it on the plate I bought for Papi on Father's Day. It has a big marlin jumping out of the dark blue water, just like the one that got away. The plate and her fake sweet voice are not going to work this time. I'm not a little kid anymore, I yell into the wall. I know, she says, her voice fraying at the edges. I want you to pin this on your shirt when you get to the airport, she says, and pushes the paper in front of my face. I read it without picking it up. Pedro Pan, please take care of my son Julian. God bless you. I don't want to wear that, I say, turning around to point at my older brothers. How come they don't have to? Alcalino and Gordo are still reading the comic books. You could never tell that they're about to leave everything behind and maybe never see our parents again. I crumple up the paper and throw it on the floor. I'm not wearing it. Gordo slaps down his comic book and starts walking in my direction. He looks angry. As I scramble away, I accidentally knock the plate out of my mother's hand. It shatters on the tile floor. Julian, what's gotten into you? She says. I know what's gotten into me. Until this morning, it had all seemed like a dream about some other kid. But now I know this is real. Now every time she says, we don't know, or maybe, she blows a little more haze away from that dream. I used to believe that my mother and father knew everything, and everything went the way they planned. But now I'm not so sure about that. Now I'm wondering what's going to be waiting for us at the other end. My mother hasn't told me everything because she thinks I'm too young to understand, and she doesn't want to scare me. But I'm not too young to know that it's not her fault, and that she doesn't really want to send us away to a strange country all alone. And I'm not too young to feel terrible about it. I take a handkerchief from my suitcase and start picking up the jagged pieces of sky and sea. I'll glue it back for you, Mommy, I promise. I wrap up the pieces in my handkerchief and slip them into my pocket and then pick up the name tag. I'll put it on when I get there, I mumble, but I'm not sure she heard me. She's staring past me. Her face is a closed door. When we get into the car, she turns around and looks at us for a second like she wants to say something, but then she turns away and hangs her head. The airport is crowded with bored soldiers, nervous parents, and dazed children. When they call out our names, we're led into a small room. The man behind the desk points at the envelope my mother's holding. She hands it to him and he spreads out our passports on his desk. He's matching the passport photo to the face, then the name. Alcalino? Eduardo? I'd almost forgotten Gordo's real name. Then he looks at me. Julian? I'm trying my best to look bored like my brothers, but then he points at me. Search him, the man says. Why me? I try to keep smiling just like my parents, so he won't know just how scared I am. I follow the guard and my suitcase into a small room across the hall, wondering why he picked me. The guard is a big guy, stuffed into a khaki shirt with the collar buttoned up too tight. His head looks like it's going to explode as he swings my suitcase up into a metal table. He's looking right at me as he tumbles through my clothes. Then he runs his hand along the inside wall of my suitcase, right where the bird is hidden. I concentrate on the bulging vein splitting his forehead in half. I don't want to look down and give it away. His hand stops near the corner. Did he find a suspicious edge behind the blue lining? Now I can't look away. Gordo told me once that when you're in trouble and you can't think of anything else to do, you yell. Papi! I scream. The guard's face flushes a weird pink. Quiet, he growls as he tries to find the edge again. Then I yell even louder, Mommy! The sound bounces off the bare cement walls. He claps his big hand over my face. What's the matter with you? I wiggle free and jump out into the hallway. He grabs the back of my collar and lifts me off the ground. I can't breathe, I gasp. Then I hear my mother. Ay Dios, Julian! She's running down the crowded hallway yelling, What are you doing to him? A crowd gathers and soldiers muscle the onlookers against the wall. No one dares to push back. No one says a word. They watch silently as the two guards push my mother and me into another small room where my father and brothers are waiting. My father stands up. Senor, I apologize. He's not used to being searched. He looks at his watch and smiles at the little man behind the desk. Por favor, Capitan. Our plane leaves in just 3 minutes. Getting your children on the airplane is not my department. My job is to make sure that your papers are in order, the little man says. And then he orders the red-faced guard to go ahead and search my brothers. He checks the passports very carefully. When my mother sees me staring at the man, she raises one eyebrow and nods towards the door. Julian, why don't you wait outside? My mother is very proud of those passports. I don't know how, but she found a master forger, an artist, she called him, who changed the dates on my brothers' birthdays so that they could get out. I sit down on the floor, put my suitcase across my legs like a table, and then take out the handkerchief. The first few pieces of the plate fit together perfectly. No chips or cracks. If I had some glue, you could never tell it was ever broken. But when I put all the pieces together, there is still a hole right in the middle where the palm tree should be. I'm missing one piece. 25 minutes after the airplane is scheduled to leave, my father opens the door. "Let's go," he says. I swipe the plate into the napkin, shove it into my pocket, and run to the room. Inside, my mother is checking her lipstick in a little mirror. Finally, she snaps her pocketbook closed, grabs the passports, and leisurely strolls out. She's too proud to let the little man get the best of her. When my father closes the door, her expression changes from poker face to pure panic. "Run!" she yells, as Alcalino and Gordo walk out into the hallway. We arrive panting at the gate. The propellers on the silver airplane are spinning. A man in blue coveralls is standing on the wing, getting ready to close the door, as my mother waves our forged papers at the guard. "Here," my father says as he hands me a box of cigars. "They can't get the good Cuban cigars in America. Even the president is looking for them. They're as good as dollars up there," he says. I'm not sure what he means, but I tuck them under my arm and look away as he pulls me in. I want to tell him I'm sorry for losing his lucky fish and breaking his lucky plate, but I can't. Then he looks into my eyes. "I know what you're thinking, Julian, and it wasn't your fault," he says. "This is all coming long before you lost that fish." Just to hear him say, "You lost that fish," makes me flinch. He hugs me one more time, pressing my nose into the scented handkerchief in the pocket of his suit. Then my mother whispers, "I love you." She kisses me on the forehead. "Take good care of my little swallow. We're going to need it when you get out." I can tell she's trying to control herself, but I know she can't hold back for long. Her face looks like a big raindrop that's about to burst. Then, someone pulls me out into the heat and noise of the runway. Alcalino and Gordo are running ahead of me into the midday glare. I'm trying to catch up, but I can't feel my legs on the hot cement. I'm floating behind them like a balloon on a string. As we run past the man in the blue coveralls, he waves at the pilot. We run up the steps onto the plane, and then the big door closes behind us. As we bank over Havana, the broken plate in my pocket is poking into my leg, reminding me that it's not a dream. Everything has fallen apart. 1 minute we were together and safe, and the next minute everything is broken and dangerous. Outside, the thunderheads are rolling white cloud boulders into castles high in the deep blue sky. Our new dictator can wave his cigar, wag his finger, make people stand in lines, fill the streets with tanks and soldiers, close my school, turn everything upside down. But he can't tell the clouds what to do. Every day, like clockwork, the clouds still build their castles. Then they come tumbling down with the afternoon showers. Miami Airport. "We're about to land," Alcalino says. I can barely hear him over the roar of the engines. 2 ladies across the aisle are frantically fingering their rosary beads as the tires screech on the Miami runway. Everybody's waving and shouting as if a great miracle has occurred. Gordo is already standing up in the aisle as Alcalino leans over me. "Julian," he says softly, "grab the cigars." When we step out of the airplane, I stop on the first step to look out at the flat landscape. The rising thunderheads almost look the same as the ones I left behind. But then, the slap of the gasoline breeze wakes me up, and everything looks very different. Alcalino prods me down the step. "Pay attention. Look where you're going." At the bottom of the stairs, a man in a dark suit smiles and reaches in for my box of cigars. "Oye, ¿qué haces? What are you doing?" I clutch the box tightly, but the man pulls even harder. "Alcalino, mi tabacos," I yell. What luck. The first person I meet in the United States is a cigar thief. When he realizes that I'm not going to let go of the box, he waves a $10 bill in front of my face. "Dolores, muchos dolores." Why is he saying that? Dolores means pains in Spanish. But when I listen a little closer, I remember what my father said. They're as good as dollars. Gordo reaches past me and grabs the bill. "Give him the box, stupid. Take the money." "Welcome to America," the man says as he collects the cigar box. Alcalino grabs my arm, I follow him into the terminal and then stop at a row of green plastic chairs by a wall with framed travel posters hanging on it. This is where a guy named Jorge is going to pick us up and take us to the camp. Look for a guy wearing a yellow hat, Alcalino says as we sit down. Who is that guy going to give the cigars to? I ask Alcalino as I study the face on the $10 bill. Papi told me that they're for the president. I think his name is Kennedy. He's crazy about Cuban cigars, he answers. I'm looking around at all the happy reunions. Each traveler searches the crowd, finds their smiling face, then they hug and pull back to get a good look and hug again. I search the crowd too, but I don't even know the guy who's supposed to pick us up. Then Gordo points at a tall man who's walking toward us. Alcalino, is that the guy? He's got the hat. Alcalino stands up. Jorge, Pedro Pan? He asks and then puts his hand out. The tall man shakes his hand, then slaps him on the back. Welcome to America. Initiation. A strange city is glittering in the distance as we breeze along the empty highway. Then we zigzag through a maze of streets lined with seemingly identical little houses. I'm counting the lefts and the rights, looking for landmarks. But then we turn into a dirt road surrounded by a field of swamp grass, scrub oak, and palmettos. We'll never be able to find our way out of here, I mumble out the window. At the end of the road, there's a gate with a wooden sign swinging above it. Crudely carved letters spell out Camp Kendall. When the station wagon squeals to a stop, Jorge points at the kids pouring out of the 4 metal buildings that look like huge pipes cut in half. There's your welcoming committee. Why are they all wearing bathing suits, I ask. But before he can answer, the car doors open, and hands reach in and pull us out into a cloud of red dust. We're surrounded by a mob, and I can't see daylight. Just the pattern on my brother's shirts right in front of me, and an occasional wild face rushing by. The mob is chanting, Piscina, piscina, vamos a la piscina. The pool, let's go to the pool. When the crowd begins to move, it feels as if we've been swallowed by a big animal. I hear the sound of splashing water, screams, and then the wall of bodies opens up, and there's choppy water below, blue skies above. I take a deep breath, plant my feet, and dive for a small opening in the mass of splashing, screaming kids. If I stay on the surface, I know they'll try to dunk me. We played this game at the pool in Havana. I swim to the bottom, kick off my shoes, and hook my toes into the drain. Above me, a tangle of kicking legs and waving arms block out the sky. They're waiting for us to come up, but I can hold my breath for a long time. To my left, Alcalino is frantically unbuttoning his shirt, and Gordo is pulling at the knot in his tie. Brilliant, I think. They're taking off their clothes so that we can blend in. I slip out of my clothes and then ball them up. I swim for the ladder, climb out, and then start running. Halfway across the dusty space, the crowd catches up. We're surrounded again, but now they're laughing and pointing at me. Gordo and Alcalino are shirtless, but still wearing their dripping dress pants. I'm down to my underwear. This is like a bad dream. An older boy swaggers into the circle. Gordo, isn't that Caballo, I whisper. Gordo is looking at Caballo, measuring him. He's even bigger than he was before, he says. Caballo was in Alcalino's class. He thought that just because he was one of the bigger boys, he could push everybody around. That's why he and Gordo never got along. Caballo might have been one of the strongest guys in the schoolyard, but the real boss was the kid who came to school with his bodyguard. When that kid was around, Caballo had to jump and dance to his tune. That was one of the reasons why nobody really respected Caballo. The other reason was he was the only kid we knew that chose his own nickname. Everybody else had a nickname given to him or her. It was something that followed you around like a stray dog. Caballo changed it and then threatened to beat up anyone that called him by his real name. Hey, Caballo, how you doing? Alcalino says and then steps forward to shake his hand. A troublesome smirk is rising on Gordo's face, and somehow I know exactly what he's going to say. Romeo, how you been? Gordo says. Caballo pushes Gordo. He flies back into the crowd. When the crowd spits him out, Gordo rushes back at Caballo. Alcalino jumps in between them. Caballo, we're all friends, he says, as he tries to hold Gordo back. The crowd is closing in. I'm hopping around on one leg, trying to pull on my wet pants, but I lose my balance and fall into a forest of dusty legs. I don't know what you're talking about, Caballo huffs. You weren't my friends. Then I see Caballo's black leather shoe come down hard on Gordo's bare foot, and now it's Caballo's turn to fly into the crowd. Boys, boys! A booming voice parts the forest of legs. Is this any way to welcome your fellow countrymen? Gordo is struggling against Alcalino's grip. I hop over and try to open the knot of Gordo's fist. Gordo, stop! He's not gonna hurt us. Gordo's temper has a low tipping point. Past that point, and he's capable of almost anything. Amigos, boys, the tall young priest says as he inspects the new arrivals. My brothers and I huddled together, barefoot and dirty. Alcalino's glasses have been knocked halfway up his forehead. Red-faced Gordo looks like he's about to pop, and I discover that I put my pants on backwards. I see you boys have been baptized, the American priest says in perfect Spanish. Then he laughs. We are a little overcrowded here, and we do not have enough adults to supervise, so I rely on certain older boys to keep order. The priest steps over to Caballo and puts his hand on his shoulder. I see you have met my friend Romeo. Caballo struggles out a thin, pleading smile at the priest. Oh yes, of course. I mean Caballo, my trusted helper. The priest corrects himself. Then someone calls out in a sing-song falsetto. Oh Romeo! Oh Romeo! The buzzing hive of kids start to giggle. Caballo nods at his helpers, and two big kids dive into the crowd, and the laughter stops. The young priest continues, This young man has been a great help. I don't know what I would do without him. He will find you a place to sleep and assign you a chore. Everyone has one. If you behave, do your chores, and get along, you will get $2 on Fridays and be allowed to go into Miami on Saturdays. Then he looks at his watch. I have to go speak to the director now. Then his face softens into a smile. Welcome, and please, try to get along. Private Suite. We're waiting outside a storeroom when 3 rolled-up camp mattresses come flying out at us. Pick them up, Caballo barks from inside the musty-smelling room. Then, as I'm trying to figure out how to carry the heavy mattress and my suitcase, Caballo tosses 3 pillows at us. Alcalino and Gordo tuck their mattresses under one arm, but my arm is too short to go around. Follow me, Caballo orders, and they start walking away. They're halfway down the hall when I finally figure it out. I balance the mattress on top of my head, wedge the pillow under the other arm, and pick up my suitcase with my free hand, just as my brothers did. The mattress tips and unrolls as I hurry down the hall, but I finally catch up at the entrance to a long green room. This is the dormitory where most of us sleep, Caballo says. The 2 older guys walking behind us laugh, but I don't get the joke. This place is nothing like my mother said it would be. It looks and smells like the hospital where I had my tonsils taken out. I was scared when I walked into that hospital, and I'm scared now. I want to drop everything and run away, but I can't do that, so I start counting the metal bunk beds. Bebo taught me this trick. He said that if you concentrate real hard on what's going on outside of you, where you are, you won't think about the scared feelings inside. 30 bunks on the left side, 30 on the right. 60 times 2, 120 kids sleeping in the same room. There's a window and a tall green locker in between each set of bunks. All the beds are made up the same. Green blankets, a white sheet neatly folded back. When we get to the end of the room, Caballo kicks open a green door. And this is where you'll sleep, he says. Your own private suite. I throw the heavy mattress down and look around. This is a bathroom, I say, and the older guys laugh even louder. I guess this is the punchline. Caballo swings the door open and points at me. I always knew you were the smart brother. I follow Gordo out of the bathroom. Hey, Caballo, he yells. Why are you acting like such a big shot? Caballo whips around. Because, Gordo, there's no one in here to stop me from being the big shot, and you better remember that. When we walk back into the bathroom, Alcalino is busy looking around for a place to put our stuff. We can put our bags and things in here in the morning, he says, when he finds an empty broom closet. I'll talk to the priest and see if we can get our own beds. Gordo is still fuming. He thinks he's a big shot. We'll show him, right, Alcalino? Listen, Gordo, you better try to get along with him. I've got a feeling that Caballo could make our life miserable if you don't. Angel in the dirt. In the morning, Alcalino stashes our suitcases in the closet, and Gordo stacks the mattresses on top while I flush the 3 toilets and try the water in the faucets just to keep busy. When our things are safely put away, we step out of the dormitory into a red dust field with 4 gray metal buildings stacked around it. The only trees in the camp huddle in a clump around a shed. Patches of prickly grass grow like green islands in a sea of red dust. I can't decide if the tall chain-link fence running around the whole camp is there to keep the kids in or the dangerous-looking swamp out. This place looks nothing like the log cabins in the color pictures of American camps that my mother showed me. Outside the fence, there's a wild jumble of vines and prickly bushes. I press my face into the fence and say, "Bet there's a million snakes out there." Next to the fence, to our right, I see a cloud of red dust rising out of a hole. "There's something digging under the fence," I say. The shower of dirt stops, and a boy's head pops out. The red smudged face looks at us and then pops back in. The kid looks familiar. I run to the hole and poke my head in. "Who's in there?" I hear muffled voices coming from inside the hole, and then a little dirt man springs up smiling. Hair, face, and hands, even his teeth, dusted red by the clay. I stumble back. It's Pepe. But this boy is the opposite of Pepe. Havana Pepe, the pampered baby of his family, was always dressed up in white. "Pepe, what are you doing here?" I ask. Pepe considers the question for a second. "Probably the same thing that you are, waiting for my parents to come." He rubs his forehead, and a red streak flashes just above his eyebrows. Pepe watches Alcalino inspecting the opening of the hole. "I bet there's someone in there that would like to see you," he says, just as a red hand creeps out of the hole and reaches for his calf. "Ow!" he yells. "Angelita?" Alcalino asks. Pepe winks at us and then sinks into the dirt. "Alcalino is here." We're all bending over the hole as a red baseball cap rises slowly out of the little cave. Alcalino stutters. Angelita? Angelita pulls the cap down over her eyes and glares at Pepe. "I'm going to kill you. I wanted to clean up first." Then she turns to us and says, "And what are you 3 staring at?" Gordo laughs. "What do you mean, what are we looking at? You're the one that's crawling out of a hole in the ground." I jump inside and peer into the dark hole. The tunnel runs under the fence, out into the swamp. "Are you going to escape?" I ask Pepe. "No, we're going to use it to go pick tomatoes." "Tomatoes?" "I don't see any tomatoes," Alcalino says cautiously, studying the jumble of vines and bushes outside the camp. "You can't see the fields from here. They're on the other side of the swamp," Angelita says, and then starts walking toward the shed surrounded by tall, thin trees. "Let's get out of the sun." Gordo shakes his head. "You have to dig a tunnel first so you can go pick tomatoes?" "Shut up, Gordo. I'll explain it all later," she says, and turns to Pepe. "Is it clear?" Pepe scans the grounds. "Clear," he says, and then climbs up the delicate branches to the flat roof of the shed. It's our own leafy room with a sky blue ceiling and trees growing all around it. Angelita removes her cap, then shakes her shoulder-length hair free. "Ah, that's better. Good to see you, Julian." She gives me a hug and steps back to take a good look at me. "You've grown. Pretty soon you'll be telling your brothers what to do." Then she shakes Alcalino's hand and runs a finger over his chin. "Look at that. The last time I saw you, I counted 8 hairs. Must be at least 15 of them now." Alcalino turns red, of course. Gordo squeezes in between them. "Hey, Gordo," Angelita says and steps back. "You've grown too, Angelita," Gordo smiles. Angelita ignores Gordo's attempt at flattery. She walks to the shade and then lies down on her back. She spreads her hair like a black silk fan on the tar roof. "Right before we left, my mother wanted to chop it all off. She said it would be easier." "You have beautiful hair," Gordo croons. He pokes her forearm with the toe of his new sneaker. "So what are you doing here? We saw you leave with your parents." Aye, what a nightmare. When we got to the airport, they had given my mother and father's seats to someone else. I'm sure the little woman that took my necklace had something to do with it. My mother said that after I threw it down, she wrote our names down in her little book. My father almost had a heart attack, Angelita continued. Then my mother called this guy who helps kids get out of the country. Pedro Pan, I asked? Yeah. They had a group of kids on that airplane, and they let us go with them because we already had our papers and tickets. Alcalino is poking at the dried tar with a little stick. He breaks through it, and black oil oozes out. I can't picture your mother letting Pepe out of her sight. It wasn't easy for her, but she had no other choice. She made me swear that I would protect Pepe with my life. Pepe looks up defiantly. That's funny. She asked me to take care of you, too. You're right, Pepe. We gotta take care of each other. For once in her life, my mother was right to worry, because here, the big eat the small. Alcalino pushes his glasses back up on his nose. God, Angelita, you're so dramatic. Alcalino, you just got here, and I bet your mother didn't tell you what this place is really like. First of all, look out there. Tell me, what do you see? A lot of kids playing. Look closer. Listen, she says. On the makeshift baseball field, boys are arguing over a foul ball. In the middle of center field, 6 younger boys are busily digging in the sand. Next to the field, a small pool overflows with splashing, screaming kids. A group of girls is sitting in the shade of a small building, weaving hats out of palm fronds. At the highest point in the camp, there's a picnic table with a little roof on top. Caballo is sitting at the head of the table, dealing cards out to his friends, occasionally looking out over the fields. Alcalino shrugs. Kids playing, that's all. I know, there are no grown-ups, Gordo says. That's it, right? Angelita crosses her wrist over her eyes. You don't get it. They're not just playing. There is something funny about the way they're playing. I look a little closer, trying to compare this to all the other playgrounds and baseball fields that I remember. The first thing I notice is that I can't hear anybody laughing, and the argument on the baseball diamond is still going on. We used to have huge arguments, but only for a minute or two. Then someone would yell, "Let's play ball," and we'd start up again. Soon we would be laughing and joking around. Here, everybody seems to be concentrating and playing so hard that they're not having fun. It's like they're playing too hard, I say. Bingo, Angelita shouts and throws her arm around me. That's one of the first things I noticed when I got here. It took me a little while to figure out why everybody plays so hard. So what? We played just as hard at home, Gordo says. This is different. You'll see. When they concentrate real hard on baseball or weaving their hats, they can't think about how much they miss their parents, where they are or where they might end up. End up, I ask? No one stays here for long. That's not what our mother said. She said we would wait here until they can get out too. I say and stick my finger in the black tar. I knew there was something they weren't telling me. Angelita leans in close to Gordo and Alcalino. Didn't you tell him? They're all looking at me, shaking their heads. Tell me what, I ask, feeling like I've been left out of the joke. It's embarrassing. Even Pepe seems to know the punchline. Where are they going to send us, I ask, as I draw a shape like a raindrop with the tar. Angelita looks at Alcalino, then at me. This is just where you wait until they find a place for you. If you're lucky, you go live with a foster family. If not, they send you to an orphanage. Sometimes they can send 2 together, but 3, she shakes her head. Gordo looks at me with his "I told you so" eyebrow rising. You were the only one that told me the truth, I say. Gordo just shrugs and then says to Angelita, "They're going to send us to live in an orphanage?" Angelita stands up. "I don't want to scare you, but you should know how things work here." That doesn't scare us, right, Alcalino? Gordo says. Alcalino doesn't answer. He's watching the older kids who have been playing cards stroll out to the baseball field. They grab the ball and bat and then force the younger kids off. When one of the younger boys complains, an older kid pushes him down and then stands over him. Not one of the boy's friends dares to push back. They help the boy up and then skulk off to a pocket of open space by the fence. I guess you're right, Angelita. The big fish do eat the small here, Alcalino says. Caballo and the older boys are going to eat us up like minnows if we don't stick together. Gordo sticks his chin out. No one's going to boss us around, right, Alcalino? Again, Alcalino doesn't answer Gordo. What else don't we know about this place, he asks. Angelita tucks her hair back into her cap and pulls Pepe up by the collar of his shirt. We have lunch at 12 and dinner at 6. Then she looks at Gordo like she's annoyed at him. By the way, everybody's talking about how you pushed Caballo, she says, and Gordo smiles. That's not good, Gordo. The most important thing you should know is that nobody pushes El Caballo. He's the boss. He'll get you back. He has to. Why, I ask. Because if he doesn't, some other kid might try the same thing. Gordo puffs out his chest. I'm not scared of him. Dolores de la Carne. We're trying to decide how and where we're going to sleep in the green-tiled bathroom when the lights flicker on and off. That's the signal. 10 minutes before lights out, Alcalino says. I'm going to sleep right here by this closet, Gordo calls out as he unrolls his mattress. Alcalino sets his bed down next to Gordo. But if I set mine down next to his, I'll be sleeping with my head up against the toilet. Why don't we sleep outside, I ask. At least it doesn't smell like a bathroom out there. Alcalino shakes his head. They have rattlesnakes here. I read that they like to crawl into your blankets to get warm. I settle on a spot on the other side of the bathroom where I can lay my head under the sink instead of the toilet. The too thin mattress and the bathroom smell kept me up all night. Every time I dozed off, the green of the tiles seeped into my dreams, and I would wake up with a taste of bathroom in my mouth. I was finally feeling my way into a black and white dream when someone came in and turned on the lights. I opened my eyes to the sound of an airplane taking off. Someone is flushing the toilet, and there's a hairy leg right in front of my face. The leg belongs to Caballo. He's standing over me, briskly brushing his teeth. Molores mismating mormu. He rinses and then spits. Report to the kitchen. Dolores doesn't like to wait. Gordo gets up on one elbow, yawns and stares at Caballo as if he has no idea where he is. I hope you enjoyed your tile beds, Caballo laughs as he wipes the white line of toothpaste dripping down his chin. We never slept better, Gordo says and smiles. Thank you for asking, Romeo. Caballo takes a step towards Gordo, but he reconsiders. Keep it up, Gordo. This is nothing like it was at school. Here, I always win. Before Gordo can answer, Alcalino gets up. Gordo, Julian, get dressed. Let's go meet Dolores. Then he steps right in front of Caballo. Alcalino, as tall as Caballo, leans in real close and looks right into his eyes. Suddenly, Caballo doesn't look as big or scary to me. Lay off him, Caballo, Alcalino says, real low, and then leisurely starts rolling up his bed. When Caballo storms out, Gordo slaps Alcalino on the back and laughs. That was pretty good, Alcalino. You scared him. I saw his face. Alcalino just nodded. He's diplomatic like my father, but also crazy proud and protective like my mother. We follow the sound of clanging pots and a high warbling voice singing in English as we walk through the big room crowded with long tables. She'll be coming round the moon when she comes. She'll be round the mountain when she comes. This must be the kitchen, Alcalino says as he carefully pushes the door open. Inside, a big woman dressed in a faded green uniform is bending over a metal table. When she sees us, she wipes her big, beefy hands on her dirty apron and stares at us. We stare back from the doorway, keeping a safe distance between us. Well, are you coming or are you going? She says slowly in English, I guess so we can understand. I'm Dolores, and it's about time you alls got here. She throws 3 aprons across the metal table at us. Them's for you, she growls. I ain't got time for formal introductions. We got people to feed. We had English lessons in Cuba, but our teacher must have taught us a different kind of English. When she comes closer, we back out of the doorway. Get back in here, Dolores growls and sticks her belly out. Mira, mira, she says as she swings her refrigerator-sized hips around in a circle. I get it. She's showing us how to put on the apron. Then she dances past the table, grabs me by the arm, and ties the apron around me. She pulls me behind a tin bucket brimming with potatoes, hands me a knife, then leans across the table. I'll bet you boys never washed a dish or made a bed in your whole blessed life, she says, her pink face floating over a bowl of green peppers. Raised like little lords, you were. Like most of the kids here, you had someone to do all those things for you. Then that mean old revolution came, and now you got to wash dishes, sweep floors like us regular people. She shakes her head. Don't that beat all? Then she smiles at my brothers. Now, for a little history lesson. A long time ago, we had our own little revolution here. That's when we sent the king and them other highborns back to where they came from. That's when we became the United States of America. She speaks each word slowly and clearly. Here ain't nobody born better than nobody else. Comprendi? She says as she picks up her roller. Here in America, you gets back as good as you give. Then, without warning, she slams the roller down on the metal table, and green peppers bounce out of the bowl and potatoes roll under the table. Enough talk, she yells. Now pick up them potatoes and start the peeling. A mountain of potatoes, onions, and peppers have been chopped and cooked, and 100 plops of oatmeal on little yellow plastic dishes have gone out the serving window, but we haven't had the breakfast yet. Dolores, tengo que comer, Gordo calls out. We eat now? Alcalino asks. Before Dolores can answer, a river of dirty dishes starts flowing back into the kitchen. As she pulls on yellow rubber gloves, she says, You can eat later. Then she laughs, Mucho later. By the time we finish washing the breakfast dishes and finally hang up our aprons, Dolores is starting on lunch. Room for improvement, but not bad for your first day, she says, as she deals out slices of bologna into stacks of white bread. She hands each one of us a sandwich. See you tomorrow, bright and early. And muchachos, she smiles and rubs the top of my head. Welcome to America. 1 hour before they turn off the lights, we're all supposed to be writing letters home or reading. Tonight I start on my first letter. Dear Mommy and Papi, I miss you very much. I don't know what to say next, so I stop and draw one of the weird metal buildings on the left corner. Alcalino sees me doodling. Julian, quit messing around and write something, he says. I don't know what to write. You said I couldn't tell them about how mean Caballo is or how bad the food tastes, or that we're sleeping on the floor in the bathroom. What else am I going to say? You know how she is, Alcalino says. If you tell her how bad it is, she might do something crazy like try to sneak out in our boat. You think she would do that, I ask? If she thought we really needed her, she might, Alcalino says, and I believe him. If she knew they might separate us, send us to an orphanage or a home for young criminals, one way or the other, she'd get here, even if she had to swim. But what can I say, I ask, and start a doodle on the right-hand corner. Tell her that Angelita and Pepe are here. Tell her you're learning how to cook, that they have a great swimming pool. I don't know, just make something up. I guess I can tell her about cooking with Dolores. As long as you tell her she's nice. I do think she's nice, I say. You would, Gordo says sarcastically. I write about Pepe and Angelita, then about cooking with Dolores, but that's all. I'm not going to make anything up. In the blank space below, I draw Dolores. If I leave out the hairnet that creases her forehead and makes her look angry, she actually looks nice.